don't we go to our next lesson? And that's going to be kind of bringing everything together that we've been doing so far. Do you remember yesterday's lesson when our group covered like importing data sets from into pandas? And then the next set, we started to do some basic graphs. Well, it turns out you can combine stuff that we did today, like loops, or yesterday, for loops and if statements and all of that, all at the same time to help you with your data processing and plotting needs. Let's start to look at something that is super useful. But before that, let's try doing something a little more manual. Let's see if we can import more than one data set at the same time. So if you remember from yesterday, we can use pandas to import data sets like CSV files into a data frame, okay? Now let's try to do more than one file at a time. So we can try using a loop. So for file name in, and then we got to give it a list of where our data is. So let's try importing the GDP Africa and GDP Asia at the same time. I'm going to copy paste this because the chance of me misspelling it is very high. Okay, so for me, my path is in this data folder, and the file I want is this Gapminder GDP Africa. But because this is a list, remember I can have more than one item in here. So for my next item, I'm going to have the next data set. And for that one, it's going to be the GDP Asia data set. That's all I want. So I'm going to close my list. And because it's a for loop, we got to have that colon there. And then the next line is going to be indented. All right. So this is the part that's new. We haven't done this in a for loop yet. The next step we have done. Okay. We're going to read in our data set. So pd.read CSV. Before, I would actually have the name of the file, but because this is now going to be part of a loop, instead of the file itself, I'll put the loop variable, which is just file name. And then the rest of the code was the same. It had this index call equals country. Okay. And that'll be fine, except within the loop, it doesn't do anything. It's just importing it and not doing anything. So just to see that this is working, why don't we just show what's the minimum? Okay, so I want to print the minimum for each data set, right? So for file name, as it goes through this loop, it's going to first look at Africa. So this is going to refer to the Africa data set. And then it's going to show me the minimum for the countries in Africa. And then as it loops in, it'll go to Asia, import the Asia data set, and then show me the minimum for the countries within Asia. All right, so let's try that. This is important because if this step doesn't work, that means you might need to adjust your path a little bit. If you have your code running within the same place as your data, then you should get rid of this, right? Notice how I have my code running above the data folder. I could see the data folder on the left. If you're running code in the same place as your data, then you would actually remove this part.
Ben, right? I think I'm going back to like the first day. I remember Jane had us download specific data sets. I know Oceania, and I can't remember if she had us download Asia. I'm not sure that everyone has the entire like zip file of the all of the Gapminder data sets.
Europe.
Oh, okay. Which ones do we have?
Americas, Europe, and Oceania, I guess.
Yeah. So Robin just put it in the chat.
Okay. I put in the link for all of the data sets for this entire workshop.
Okay, but we can easily adjust this. You'll see the next step. We don't have to manually include the names of the data sets. But just for this one part, I'll put Oceania and was it Europe?
Yeah, Europe.
Okay, there we go. All right. Yeah, thanks for bringing that to my attention. That will slightly change things, but not really. There's a reason why it won't change anything, because as you notice, we inputted these things manually. If you see how this Gapminder GDP country, Gapminder GDP, sorry, consonant, Gapminder GDP consonant, seems like there's a pattern going on, right? Wouldn't it be great if we can take advantage of that pattern to do things a bit more programmatically? And we can by using what's called globbing. I didn't make this up. So this method is going to be the preferred method instead of manually doing what we just did. So let's see if we can do something similar, but then go ahead and print out what we have using globbing. All right. So let's import glob. And I want to see what exactly do I have in terms of CSV files. And yours might be different than mine. So I'm going to print all CSV files in my data directory. And to do that, I'll use this glob.glob function. All right. So my path is data. And instead of specifying each individual CSV that I have, I'm going to give it a pattern match of asterisk.csv. Some of you who have used Windows or even Linux and stuff, you may have seen this pattern of asterisk.file extension. Okay, so let's try that. And you might have different files than me, but our code should all be similar. Right? So even though I have all the data sets, and if you have less, it doesn't matter. We're using patterns to tell us what data that we have. So that's going to be very convenient, because as you're collecting data, you might have different data sets coming in as you're doing research. And if you have a similar pattern, then you can reuse the same code to do some processing. Was everyone able to see a message showing what data sets they have on their computer? All good? For sure. So the step above this was basically manually trying to import multiple data sets. So up here, what we did was we created a for loop in order to import data sets, more than one data set at a time. Okay. The original way we used to do this was just a read.csv, and then we would put the full name of the data set, the full path of the data set here. But using a loop, I can instead have it be fed multiple data sets paths, and then read them in, and then process them the way I want it to. Well, the way we processed it here was just to do a minimum, right? But you can think of importing this and making a graph out of it, which is what we're going to do, or anything else that you like to do, a calculation, a regression model, anything that you like. Okay, and yes, for that question, yeah, the next part then moved on to trying to do this a bit more programmatically. Okay, if you don't have any CSV files, yeah, it could be because of this part. For me, my path is that I stored everything in this data folder. So that's why I put data slash. It's possible that this is not the same folder that you have your CSV files in. You can try, if this gave you nothing, you can try to change it to like this part. Or that works too. Basically to tell it to read the current directory. But for me, my current directory doesn't have CSV files. It's in the data folder, which is why for me, I'm going to put data slash. Okay. Okay, perfect. All right, so this is great because now we can look at multiple files at the same time. You'll notice that I have different set of files than you do, but yet we can still do the same processing because of the similarities in the naming of these files. Let's see if we can now use this glob to try to do the same type of minimum for the data sets that we have. Okay, so let's try to create a loop. So for file name in glob.glob, and again, for me, my path is data, but yours may just be in the root folder. And the pattern I have, instead of just asterisk.csv, I'm going to change it just a little bit because I have some things that I don't want to include. I have Gapminder all. I don't want that. I only want these Gapminder GDP ones. So if I were to do Gapminder, I'm sorry, if I were to do asterisk.csv, that's going to capture everything, right? So let's see what happens. And again, I'm going to use that same naming convention to do pd.read CSV, the file name. And then you do whatever processing you like. For now, I'm just going to get the minimum of GDP. Why don't I use 1952? What do we put if we have data in Jupyter Lab? First run, I obviously misspelled something. Oops, missed it, close parentheses. Okay, I'm not sure I understood the question. End of understanding string literal error. Maybe that one could be like a breakout room, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Sanjeet, can you grab? Will you be able to pop into a breakout room and help Tyler? Excellent.
Don't forget, Christina should be available to
Okay,
chat with her.
Okay. So I put asterisk.csv and I got everything. But you can imagine that you have multiple files and you only want some of them to go through your processing. So for me, I actually didn't want this one, right? I wanted these, but not the Gapminder all. So you can actually edit this pattern so that it will give you what you want. So I'm going to now give it a little bit more specifics. So Gapminder, and if I put like this pattern, it will still pick up this CSV file. But if I be more specific and I write GDP, then that's not going to match this first one anymore. It's only going to get all these other ones which are of interest to me. So if I run it, you'll notice, there you go. You basically only select the ones with the pattern that you want, all right? You probably noticed then that this asterisk is like a wild card, meaning everything else. Okay. So far, okay. Now, I want to make sure it worked for for everyone, because some of the directories will be different. Is anyone having issue with anything so far? Because we're already ready to tap. For sure. Glob is going to look for patterns. So above, when we were doing this manually, we had to keep putting very similar information like data, Gapminder, GDP, Oceania, data, Gapminder, GDP, Europe. But to take advantage of the similarities and patterns, we can use this glob to identify those common patterns and then import everything at the same time. Sure, you're welcome. And you notice that we can adjust the pattern here to suit our needs. This asterisk is a wild card, meaning anything. All right. Now, this is a non-coding question, but what do you think would be picked up in this following question? So let's say we have 1, 2, 3 things. So if I have this expression, glob, and then oops, something didn't work. Hold up. That should be an asterisk. I didn't paste correctly. Okay. Oops, I pasted it wrong again. There we go. Okay. I didn't paste correctly in the notes. Sorry about that. If I have this expression right here, nope, that's wrong too. Yeah. All right, we're getting there. There we go. Okay. We'll adjust that in the notes. Apologies. But looking at this pattern, which of the ones do you think won't work? Yeah, it should be 1 and 2. Yeah, something happened with the pasting in the notes. My apologies. Did that make sense? So basically, you can take advantage of the patterns that you have in your file names in order to adjust your processing. So yeah, it should be that 1 and 2 will not be matched. Okay, now let's try a challenge. This is a large set of code, so please, please, please copy it from the learner notes. There's no way we'll make it if you copy this line by line. We're going to now combine everything we've done. All right, so for this challenge, I'm going to paste this note. It's long. Okay, we're going to see everything we've done up to now. So that includes importing data into pandas and using this, well, that would be the answer, using what we just did in order to programmatically select based off the patterns in our data, our file names, and then using a for loop, and then of course, using our if statements. So 3 different places, 1, 2, and 3. Can you get this to work so that we can create multiple graphs from our multiple data sets? Right, so there's 3 places where you need to change the code. Here's 1, here's 1, and here's 1. This is our last challenge for this topic. So let's take a few minutes, and when you have it working, please go ahead and put the green symbol. Or if you have any questions, please let us know.
Can you put it in the notes, please?
Coming soon. Yes, it should be coming up.
You should be able to see it now.
I think one piece of the instructions disappeared. Just to clarify, we assume everyone knows statistics. So sorry about that. But basically, for outliers, as it's tagging, it should be less than -2 or greater than 2. All right, so sorry if that detail did not get pasted into the notes. So as for your outliers, you want it to be greater than 2 or less than -2.
It's pretty quiet out there. How is everyone doing? We see a couple, like 3, 4 awesome green check marks. Then let us know if you need some assistance, if you're spending a good couple hours with us this morning. We want to make sure that you are getting what you need. And you're able to successfully complete these challenges. Let's see the second link. Do you have a hint for Tyler, perhaps, Ben?
So this is the point where, so this is going to be our loop variable, and this is going to be something that we can loop on. So what in here are we trying to loop through? Typically, it's some kind of iterable, like a list or a range. Did we create any of those?
Can I go to breakout room with someone? Because my code seems to work, but it doesn't show me any plot.
Sure. Sanjeet, are you free?
I just became free. Yes, Essia, let's go
Nice.
in a breakout room.
Thank you.
Let's see, where are you?
Sure thing.
I'm guessing it's this. If it's not reading any data, it won't pick up it won't make any graphs.
Do you have to do that print plot piece? Oh, yep, plot show, it's at the bottom.
Some of the green check marks are going away. Maybe that's automatic. Oh, one came back. Okay, it's possible some people don't have scipy.stats.
Is that a package that you have to install separately, or does that come with?
I thought it came with it, but I've had this so long, it's possible that it's something that someone might
Mhm.
install wouldn't have. So that would be an oversight. So apologize for that.
Well, some people had it.
Yeah, it just depends what options.
Gotcha. Is there a reference that we can provide them to show how to install that package?
Basically, if, for example, I'm trying to install it through here, I would use that pip install method. And if I'm trying to run it within this notebook, I would use like a exclamation mark. And then the package name, which would be SciPy. But there's a few other ways to install it. Okay, I feel like we have plenty check marks. I could be wrong. Ready to go through this? Okay, why don't we go through this just so we also stay on time for your next fun lessons. All right, so with our file list part right here, basically it's trying to utilize the patterns that we have in our file names to import. So what do we do? Remember that was going to be that glob. Okay, so we can replace this part with our glob.glob. And you might need to adjust this depending if your data is stored within the same place as your code, so your root folder, or if you have it like mine within a folder called data. Okay, now the next part. So we want to loop over the files and have a separate plot. And the thing that we need to change is right here. So within our loop, this is the loop variable for file name and what. This is typically going to be something that it can iterate over and over. So far what we've used are things like ranges or lists. You notice we've created a list of all our file names under file list. All right. And then finally, we have this if, elif, else statement. We want to identify outliers. And for us, the outliers were going to be defined as less than -2 or greater than 2. So it looks like we already have the less than -2. We need to now add the greater than 2. Okay. And with that, assuming nothing else has changed, then what it's going to do is read in each data set, do our processing, and we should have a graph for every file, CSV file that matches this pattern. So if I run that, I get, because I have data sets that you might not have, I'm going to get different set of graphs. So this is also showing that you can reuse code for whenever you have new data to use it on. So I get a graph for Africa showing some outliers that I've identified for the Americas. I have it for Asia, Europe, Oceania. So if we all have different data sets, it should still work because of the patterns that as matching. Any questions about this challenge or anything within the lesson so far? Okay, and as always, if you think of any, please let us know. But I think at this part, we're done for this lesson, and we're going to move on after a short 5-minute break. Thanks, everyone. 5-minute break.